Welcome to the debate. Today we're examining a really profound clash between modern demographics and technological intervention. And it's all centered on a Chinese application known as Are You Dead? Or Dumu internationally. This app has just, shot up the paid charts by offering a very basic but critical safety check-in for this colossal and growing population of solo dwellers.
It's a fascinating cultural barometer, isn't it? I mean, it reflects these immense social pressures that are building in China. We're talking about what, an estimated 300 million people approaching retirement age in the next decade, and a staggering projection of 200 million people living entirely alone by 2030. So the need for some kind of solution is it's undeniable.
In the context here isn't isolated, it's global. The source material points out similar demographic time bombs, everywhere. In the US, loneliness has been formally labeled an epidemic, partly driven by the 10,000 people who turn 65 every single day. So our central question is this: does technology like Dumu, which offers a simple, automated, a binary daily check-in, does it represent a genuinely scalable, necessary solution to this global epidemic of aging and solitude? Or is it more of a superficial technological fix that risks normalizing isolation while actively failing to address deeper human needs?
hmm That distinction between a necessary safety tool and a systemic solution is, I think, the absolute heart of the matter.
And I'll be arguing that Dumu, or technology like it, is an indispensable and pragmatic baseline safety net. The sheer scale of this demographic shift means that human systems simply can't cope. So a high-tech, low-cost solution is really the only viable path to guaranteeing basic physical security for millions.
And I'm going to contend that while, yes, Dumu is effective at verifying that literal "are you dead" metric, its focus on mortality completely misses the root problem. The app fundamentally fails to solve the growing epidemic of loneliness, and it risks substituting genuine, necessary human connection with this kind of cold, algorithmic surveillance, thereby reinforcing the very solitude it's supposed to manage.
Okay, so let's start with the logistics, because to grasp why a technological solution is so essential, we have to appreciate the scale. When we talk about 200 million people living alone, that's roughly the entire population of Pakistan or 2/3 of the United States, all of whom will eventually require some form of monitoring or check-in assistance. Relying on traditional family or community networks to manage that capacity is, it's not just difficult, it's an operational impossibility. Especially when you factor in the declining marriage rates and rising divorce rates the material mentions.
And I fully acknowledge the capacity problem. The logistical challenge of caring for hundreds of millions of people is enormous, I get that. But that enormous pressure, in my view, shouldn't excuse neglecting the mental and emotional component of this crisis. The source material tells us that many people are choosing or, finding themselves in solitude because they are too busy for relationships. We're witnessing a societal shift away from relational investment.
That may be true, but Dumu addresses the most critical, time-sensitive issue first, which is preventing a preventable death due to lack of awareness. The app is incredibly straightforward. One click, once a day. If you miss 2 consecutive days, it alerts your designated contact. This simple, reliable, binary system provides a foundation of physical security. For someone who lives alone and may forget to maintain constant, deep relationships, this app guarantees a mechanism to alert help in a sudden, catastrophic medical event. That is non-negotiable infrastructure.
And that is precisely where the danger lies, I think. The app is a grim safety net, yes, but it risks creating what I'd call the paradox of monitoring. Does knowing an algorithm is watching you make you feel supported, or does it simply serve as a stark daily reminder of your profound solitude? We're addressing the tragic consequence, dying alone, by offering a technical workaround that reinforces the core cause, the collapse of relational maintenance. If the technology efficiently manages the crisis consequences, it actually diminishes the urgent societal pressure to fix the isolation itself.
But that assumes technology and human support are mutually exclusive. We have to be pragmatic here. Dumu is the first line of defense. Even the most relationally well-adjusted person can suffer a stroke or a fall. The app simply guarantees that when people forget or when human systems fail, there is a systemic fallback. We are guaranteeing physical safety. That is the necessary prerequisite before we can even begin to address mental well-being.
I see your point regarding physical safety as a prerequisite, but that leads us directly to the mental and emotional toll of the loneliness epidemic. You yourself noted that the U.S. federal government calls loneliness an epidemic. An epidemic isn't solved by simply making sure the isolated individual doesn't immediately expire. A simple mechanical daily click is not and cannot be a substitute for the complex social interactions that combat chronic solitude.
Okay, let's pivot to the efficacy and, the reliability of the check-in mechanism itself, particularly for the target demographic. I'm just not convinced that this one-click-per-day system is robust enough to handle the sheer volume of elderly and busy users. The source material itself mentioned the risk of a user simply forgetting the click, which would inevitably, quote, freak out a lot of people.
I agree that forgetfulness is a challenge, but I would argue the simplicity enhances compliance, especially among a demographically varied user base, including seniors who might struggle with complex interfaces. The fact that the technology is pretty straightforward is exactly why it has scaled so quickly. We have to prioritize reliability of the core life-saving function over interface complexity.
But the risk of failure here is significant, and it's twofold. First, you have false alarms from simple forgetfulness, which stresses the emergency context. When contacts are repeatedly alerted unnecessarily, it leads to alert fatigue. They might start to ignore future potentially genuine emergency alerts. This degrades trust in the system, potentially rendering the safety net useless over time. And second, the elderly population, the people who require this monitoring the most, is statistically the most susceptible to forgetfulness or temporary illness that prevents them from engaging, which then triggers a crisis alert unnecessarily.
That is a legitimate logistical challenge, I'll grant you, regarding user interaction. It requires fine-tuning. However, we can't simply evaluate the system based only on the lowest common denominator, that basic binary click. We have to look at the app's capacity for evolution. Dumo claims to include more sophisticated features, the ability to input health data like weights or blood pressure, and an AI guardian to analyze it. This shows the capacity to move beyond mere surveillance and towards genuine proactive health guidance.
I'm glad you brought up the AI guardian because that is where the illusion of comprehensive care truly begins. If we're to believe Dumo offers sophisticated support, you have to detail how this AI provides scaled guidance that doesn't just feel like a lecture from a machine. Otherwise, it's just surveillance dressed up in wellness language.
Well, the AI acts as a smart monitoring agent. By inputting consistent health data, let's say daily weight or heart rate readings, the AI establishes a unique baseline for the individual. The sophisticated part is its predictive ability. It can identify deviations from that baseline that are common precursors to major health crises, a rapid weight loss, for example, which might signal a serious underlying issue before the user even becomes incapacitated. This shifts the focus from the user remembering to click to the user providing continuous passive data. The check-in button then becomes just the essential final safeguard, not the only feature. This level of personalized, non-intrusive monitoring is only scalable through AI.
I appreciate that technical explanation, but we have to evaluate the app based on what made it a phenomenon. It's not called AI Predictive Health Monitor. It's called Are You Dead? The public consciousness, the mass adoption of this application, is overwhelmingly focused on mortality, not proactive wellness. If the app's core identity is fixated on the absence of death, the sophisticated health features are likely ignored by the vulnerable users who just want a simple safety button. We risk confusing the availability of a feature with its actual utilization, especially when the marketing is all about existential fear. The AI guardian in this context just sounds like an algorithmic replacement for a human doctor or caregiver who would offer genuine empathy alongside the diagnosis.
But if the goal is to deploy an effective, comprehensive safety net at scale, then the complexity of the back end matters more than the simplicity of the front end. If the technology can quietly analyze continuous data and flag potential health declines to a designated human contact before the 2-day check-in failure, that fundamentally alters the nature of the service. It becomes a predictive, potentially life-extending service, not merely a passive alarm system.
Let's turn now to the cultural framing and the naming convention, because the focus on mortality that's inherent in the name is, well, it's profoundly revealing. It reflects a cultural acceptance of solitude as the default state, rather than striving for connection.
I think we're holding the name to an unfair standard. Yes, the name is blunt, but it reflects the stark reality for solo dwellers who face a catastrophic risk if they fall ill unnoticed. The U.S. market has similar functioning apps, Snug, Safe Circle Alert, which are just named more gently. But the function is identical. Systematic, scalable verification of survival. The difference in nomenclature simply reflects different cultural approaches to candor, not necessarily a difference in functionality or intent.
I come at it from a different way. The suggestion in the source material that a comparable U.S. product might be named "Are you okay, my friend?" versus the Chinese name "Are you dead?" that highlights a crucial tension. The Western phrasing attempts to evoke a sense of relational care, even if it's delivered by an algorithm. The Dumu phrasing, however, focuses purely on existential status.
And why is that inherently negative? If the reality is that 200 million people are in solitude, and that solitude poses an existential threat, maybe a blunt name helps users and contacts acknowledge the severity of the challenge immediately. Candor can be a form of practical efficiency. We shouldn't penalize an effective system just because its label makes us uncomfortable about the societal reality it addresses.
Because a technology that frames human existence around the absence of death, rather than the presence of life and healthy social habits, which is the goal of most robust wellness apps, risks cementing solitude as the new normal. We are celebrating the engineering efficiency of the safety net, while ignoring the fact that society is actively retreating from the human responsibility of checking in on each other. This app encourages that retreat. It says you don't need to maintain that relationship. The algorithm has it covered.
But if that solitude is the demographic normal for 200 million people, isn't it irresponsible, maybe even cruel, to refuse them a reliable safety mechanism simply because we wish they had more friends? We have to deal with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Dumo addresses the most urgent critical need, preventing preventable deaths due to lack of immediate awareness. I believe we can simultaneously advocate for better social policy to fight loneliness and deploy effective technological safety nets for those who are already isolated.
And I can see that critical need for immediate safety, but I hold that the technological efficiency of Dumu acts as a powerful palliative measure, one that dangerously masks the severity of the social disease. The app is a stunning success because people are too busy to care for their neighbors and family in the way traditional societies once did. If the app is wildly successful, it effectively tells the user and society you do not need meaningful, complex human interaction to be safe. This reinforces the very social trend, the decline in relational investment that led to the app's necessity in the first place.
Ultimately, I maintain that technology is the only mechanism that can currently address the sheer volume of this looming demographic crisis. We're talking 200 million solo dwellers, 300 million retirees. Dumo provides a non-intrusive, scalable, and essential baseline safety standard that neither public services nor declining personal relationship networks can reliably provide at the scale. And the fact that the system also offers advanced AI health monitoring, even if it's underutilized today, shows its potential to be a comprehensive and necessary piece of infrastructure for modern solo living.
And while I can't dispute the pragmatic necessity for scaling a safety mechanism, I have to reiterate my core concern about the loneliness epidemic. Dumu provides physical safety efficiently, yes, but it risks creating an illusion of care that substitutes for the genuine human connection and relational maintenance that the source material clearly shows is declining. The app is an advanced tool for managing the consequences of solitude, but it is not a cure for solitude itself. And we must be highly cautious about allowing technological pragmatism to obscure the deeper human need for connection and community investment.
I think what we've really highlighted today is the agonizing trade-off between scaling a necessary safety feature for millions and preserving deep human connection. We agree the aging crisis and the loneliness epidemic are urgent challenges, but we diverge on whether a baseline technical check-in is truly sufficient or, even beneficial in the long run.
Exactly. The material shows a profound tension between how efficiently technology can manage physical risks and how poorly it seems to address our emotional and social deficits. So the question remains for our listeners. Are we willing to accept algorithmic surveillance as the new standard of care for our most vulnerable? Or will we demand that technology serve as a supplement rather than a replacement for community? There is clearly so much more to explore in this intersection of aging, loneliness, and our dependence on technology.